Okay, welcome to lesson 9. So, it's going to get crazy now. This is where things are going to get a little weird, and I'll tell you why. A lot of this next part is going to have, I've done a lot of like kind of R&D and trying this and trying that and trial and error to see how we go from these. Right now we got these cut points, right? But eventually we're going to need to make something that actually does this. So we're going to need to take those cut points and actually chop stuff up in such a way that looks that works and tends to work for most situations. So here's where you're going to have to trust me just a little bit, and we're going to do some things that are going to seem a little bit weird. First thing we're going to do is, remember I talked about that 2Dification, and I said we're not going to do that for the stones, we're going to do for the bricks. So let's just go ahead and let's do that. Basically, all I'm saying is that we're going to do a transform here on these guys, and we're going to say around their center, CX, CY. I don't know why this is the default. Complain to Houdini and make it the default. Can. We're going to take them and scale them in Z, or if you're American like me, scale it in Z, which means bonk. Okay, so this is that thing you probably thought, why didn't we do that in the first place? And that's what I'm going to explain later on. We aren't always going to do that. This kind of thing we will do for bricks, but not for stones. So I'm going to put a switch here that says normally we don't do it, sometimes we do. And we're going to call this process 2Dification. In other words, to deify. So this is like the do we 2Dify or not? So we're going to go out to here, and in our cut points guy, we're going to add a, and again, you can't see this, type properties. We're going to add a parameter from that node on the 2Dification. I'm going to put it into here, and it basically says, put it down at the bottom, doink. Fine, I'll put it in the middle. And this is going to be like, do we 2Dify or not? So 2Dify. And I guess you can't start a thing with a number there, so I'm going to say 2Dify. But in the label, I'm going to say 2Dify, because it's a question, and I'm going to make it a toggle. And we'll even default it to 1 for now. And I'm hitting apply. Here, I'll show you can see it. Hitting apply, hitting accept. So now I've got a little 2Dification, and that is going to be here. So that's what's going to decide if we do this or don't do this. For now, we're going to do this. So how do we get to the fun part? The fun part is one step away. We're going to actually do some particle fluid stuff, which then you're like, what? But before we do that, I want to expand these edge guys. We want these guys, remember our wall? Let's actually move our wall over here. Our wall, bonk, is there. And I want, again, I'm going to zoom in here. I want these stones to definitely be a stone. In other words, I want this gap to expand. So I want to grab these little guys at the edge and move them out just a little bit. So a simple way we're going to do that is we're just going to take, I'm going to do another transform. We're going to take the original wall, and again, pivoting around the, should make this default. We're basically going to take the points that are at the edge. This is where I start talking and doing things at the same time, messing up. Take this wall, and we're going to scale it in a little bit in X. Scale in a little in X. Why do I give these things long names? Because I won't remember by tomorrow what the heck I did today. So this is just how I'm going to grab the edge points. So let's grab this guy, scale it in a little bit in X. Like that, right? So he's a little bit tinier. And the idea is we're going to grab, I don't know if we need to be that tiny, but that's fine for now. The idea is we're going to group these points based on this guy, and we're basically going to say I want the guys that are in there in the center. In other words, these will be the inside points, right? We're going to do it with a bounding points. They're going to be a bounding object, whatever the heck you call it. It's basically the inside points. So I want to take the guys that aren't those guys, the other guys. So let's make a opposite of that, which is going to be the edge points. Hey, you hear that? It's going to be the opposite of these guys who just made these inside points. There we go. Those are the edge points. We'll even call this edge points. That's why we didn't do the $OS I keep saying to do. This is one time we don't want to do it because the group we make is the opposite group. So now we're going to take, I'm going to copy this because now we're going to scale out in X a little bit those edge points. Scale out a little in X. I'm going to do it just to the edge points. And we'll do it like the, what was that, 0.02, something like that. So we'll scale out a little bit the edge points, guys. And so I guess I should actually show that. Bonk. Move them out a little bit. You're like, huh, that's cool. So what do we do now? The final bit of the magic. There's something you've done a million times, maybe, I don't know, called when you make, how do we say this? When you have a bunch of fluid points you got from a sim and you want to turn it into a surface, there's a bunch of ways to do that. Particle from fluids, blah, blah, blah. The thing that tends to give us some options here is VDB from particle fluid. Now, right now you're thinking, we don't have a fluid. We're making rocks, we're breaking bricks, we're throwing crap through walls. There's no fluids around here. True, but we're still going to use VDB from particle fluid because it's got some nifty stuff that we're going to use to make our bricks, okay? So we're going to leave most of this stuff at its default. Although I think I usually put this up a little bit, like bonk. And I think everything else we're just going to leave the same, right? Okay, so let's see what happens. Ready? Going to press the big button. Don't break. Wum, 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 wum. And it broke. Just kidding. It just looks like it broke. Ugh. Or we made it too big and too padding. Let's try taking this guy back. Whoops. And it is a little bit broken, so we may have to adjust things. What we're going to do is we're going to change resampling the input, half voxels 4, fluid density, resample input. We're going to change this guy. See this guy, the particle separation? Our overall size here is about that. So the particle separation, this is kind of how finely we tune it. Remember, these guys are pretty tight and pretty teeny tiny. So if our overall size of this, and again, this is going to be a parameter, but our overall size is like around 3. These guys are way smaller than 0.1, so they're more like maybe 0.01. So this will be a wee bit slower, and if it's too slow, I may hit the pause button here, but we're going to hit this. It goes 1, 1, 1. Okay, now we've got something that looks a little more sense-making. And as you can see, it's a VDB. We haven't actually turned it into a object, but you can kind of see what I'm going with here. Let's see what we can do to make this a little bit more interesting. Like if we make those, I don't even see that. That was pretty subtle. But anyway, so this is our start. So that's our VDB. Now, this VDB, we still have some things we need to do. It's a little bit teeny tiny. You can see our wall is this guy. You can see the wall is a little bit bigger than that. So what we're going to do is we're going to scale out, like widen our VDB. And we can actually just literally do that with a transform. I know it's a little weird to do on volumes. Probably not used to doing that, but we normally, again, we're going a little crazy. So what we want to do is we want to make it big enough so that it pokes through both sides, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So I'm going to call this the thicken in Z. And the other thing I'm going to say is this is only something we do if it's 2D. We're going to do it slightly differently if it's not 2D. So thicken in Z again around here. And we're going to thicken in Z by a certain amount. Now that amount has got to be big enough that it's always bigger than the wall. We could just do a number and have it, leave it up to the person working this and have it a parameter. That seems a little cheaty, but let's. What I'm going to do actually is it's going to be a kind of complex equation eventually in the end. And what we're going to do is make it so we're actually going to take a B box of this guy. In other words, we're going to take the bounding box of the wall in Z and divide it by the bounding box of our original input in Z and then have a multiplier on that. Oh, it's a little complex. So I'm going to leave that alone just for a second. I'm going to show you this. See how it's gigantic? We don't really need it to be that. We just need it to be big enough to make it wider than that. So we're kind of basically saying, I'll just do it. This is going to seem like a pain, but it is a pain. Complain to Houdini. We're going to take the bounding box of our wall, right? This guy, whoop. bounding box over wall in ZD underscore Z size, okay, divided by the bounding box of the guy right above me, this VDB from particle fluid, which I'm just going to call VDB to make it easy. You also could use op input here if you wanted to go totally silly, but that's just a lot of typing, so I'm not going to do that. We'll do from VDB, bonk, and again, D underscore Z size. Let's see, does that make sense? So that probably makes it exactly as big. Now, since it's a VDB, it doesn't actually go to the edge, I'm going to multiply that by 10. It's overkill, and bonk. So this guy, we're thickening it up massively. And the reason I'm doing that is just to make sure it goes all the way through. It doesn't really matter because, again, these have been 2Dified. There's no variance on here. Later on, when we do it without 2D, we'll use a different thicken, and we'll do that in the next lesson. Anyway, so our next thing is going to be do some VDB tricks to get our stone and get our mortar and then move forward from there. So it's going to be cool. We're almost there. Come back to the next lesson.